Hi, I'm Lily, 25, and if you ever want to know what the forgotten twin feels like, I could write a manual. My sister, Lila, and I were born 8 minutes apart. She came first, glowing, loud, camera ready. I came second, quieter, apparently content just to tag along. As Mom liked to say. That line followed me through life like a curse. 2 months ago, our parents called us over for a special dinner. Dad grilled steaks. Mom had that weirdly intense sparkle in her eyes, the kind she gets before big announcements. I thought maybe they were renewing their vows, or worse, trying to set me up with someone from church. Instead, halfway through dessert, Mom slid a white envelope across the table toward Lila. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling. "We want you to have this, to follow your dreams." Inside was a $15,000 check. $15,000. I remember the number printed in that neat blue ink, and the way Lila's jaw dropped as she started crying. "Oh my God, are you serious?" she squealed. Dad chuckled proudly. "You've always had ambition, kiddo. We just want to invest in your future." I sat there with my spoon frozen midair, waiting for my envelope or at least a glance in my direction. Nothing. When the silence stretched too long, I tried to laugh it off. "So, what about me? Any dreams worth investing in here?" Mom didn't even look at me. She just said, "Lily, honey, you've never really known what you want. Let's be practical. Lila's got goals." I wish I could tell you I smiled and let it go. But the truth is, I felt something split right down the center of me that night. My sister tried to cover the awkwardness, offered to split it, even. Mom shut that down immediately. "No, this is for you, Lila. Don't let guilt ruin this." "And me?" I stared at my cracked phone screen lying next to my plate, the one I'd been begging them to help me replace for months, and realized that was my gift. A glitching, half-broken phone and a clear message: I was the backup twin. The afterthought? That was the night something in me started to shift, quietly, but permanently. That night I barely slept. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to Lila giggle in her room next door, as she FaceTimed her friends about the Dream Fund. I wasn't even angry at her, not really. She didn't ask for the money. But every, "Oh my God, my parents are the best," that floated through the wall hit like a nail being hammered into my ribs. By morning, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe Mom and Dad would talk to me later, explain. Maybe there was some plan for me too, they just hadn't said it yet. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen counter, waiting. When Mom came down, she just said, "You're up early. Can you drive Lila to the bank? She wants to deposit her check." That was it. "No, good morning, no, how are you feeling? Just chauffeur your twin while she cashes the family blessing." I said yes because I always said yes. But as we pulled out of the driveway, something inside me hardened. At the bank, Lila tried to talk. "You know, I didn't mean for it to be weird. Mom just said she'd been saving that money for me since high school." She hesitated. "I didn't even know she had a fund like that." I stared out the window, the taste of metal in my mouth. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Neither did I." On the way home, we stopped for coffee. She insisted on paying, like that would balance the universe. But when she slid the cup across the table and smiled, I saw it, the same smile I'd seen on her since we were kids. The one that said, "I feel bad, but not enough to give it back." When we got home, Mom was rearranging furniture, humming. Dad was fixing something in the garage. They both looked so content, like the world was finally in order. I wanted to scream to ask why my existence was worth so much less. Instead, I took a deep breath, walked upstairs, and did something I'd never done before. I opened my closet and started packing. Not dramatically, no yelling, no door slamming. Just quiet, steady folding. Jeans, notebooks, the stack of old sketchpads I hadn't touched in years. I didn't even know where I was going, but the idea of staying felt unbearable. Halfway through, my cracked phone buzzed. A text from Mom: "Can you pick up groceries later? Lila's busy with her project." That was the moment I decided. I wasn't picking up groceries. I wasn't staying another night. I was done being the backup plan. By the time the sun set, I'd made up my mind completely. I threw the last of my things into a duffel bag: laptop, toothbrush, the small sketchbook I used to doodle in during long family dinners when I wanted to disappear. Then I sat on my bed for a few seconds, waiting for something, a sound, a voice, maybe guilt, to stop me. Nothing did. Downstairs, I could hear laughter from the living room. Lila was showing our parents her vision board for her new business idea, something about handmade jewelry and travel blogs. Mom was clapping like it was Shark Tank. I watched from the top of the stairs for a second, just long enough to memorize how small I looked in that world, the quiet twin in the background of every family picture. I slipped out the back door. No note. No goodbye. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of pretending they'd notice. The air outside felt heavier than I expected, like even the night was holding its breath. I walked to the bus stop with $47 in my wallet and an address scrawled on a sticky note, my coworker Jenna's place. She'd once said, "If you ever need to crash somewhere, I've got a couch." I don't think she meant it literally, but I was about to test that. When I got there, she opened the door in pajama shorts, eyes wide. "Lily? Are you okay?" I laughed a weird, shaky laugh. "Yeah. Just done with my family." She didn't ask questions, just let me in. Her apartment was tiny, peeling paint, a faint smell of curry, but it felt like freedom. She tossed me a blanket and said, "Whatever happened, you can tell me when you're ready." That night, lying on her couch, I scrolled through old photos of my family. Every birthday, every Christmas, every "We're so proud of you." That had always been directed slightly to my left toward Lila. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead, I felt this strange, hollow calm. I finally opened my sketchbook. The first page was blank. I drew a small cracked phone, the one thing they'd ever given me, and underneath it, I wrote, "Starting over." That was the first time I believed I could. The first week away felt like stepping into a world without gravity. Everything was lighter and scarier at once. I picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop where I worked, borrowed clothes from Jenna, and lived off instant noodles and adrenaline. For the first time in my life, every decision was mine: where to go, when to sleep, who to call. No one checking my plans, no one comparing me to my mirror image. Mom texted 3 days later. "You haven't been home. Are you at a friend's?" I stared at the message for an hour before typing, "I'm fine." She replied, "Good. Don't worry us like that. Lila's launching her site next week. You should be supportive." That was the last straw. Not, "We miss you." Not, "Come home." Just another reminder of who mattered most. I didn't reply again. Jenna noticed me sketching one night and said, "You're really good. Why don't you post your stuff?" I laughed it off, but she wasn't kidding. She helped me set up an online account, uploaded a few of my drawings, and tagged them. Within a week, someone bought a digital print, $10, but it felt like winning the lottery. Then something weird happened. I started drawing every night, like I was trying to sketch myself back into existence. And people noticed. Comments rolled in. "This feels so real. I've been that invisible sister." It hit me I wasn't the only one living in someone else's shadow. Meanwhile, Mom kept calling less and less. I'd see her name flash on the screen and ignore it. Lila texted once, said she hoped I was figuring things out. I almost laughed. Figuring things out was all I'd been doing since I left. By week 3, I'd moved from Jenna's couch into a small room above the cafe. The landlord was a retired musician who accepted half rent in art commissions. I painted him a portrait of his old band, and he handed me the keys like I'd earned a medal. That night, sitting on my mattress under a leaky ceiling, I realized something huge. I didn't miss home. I missed the idea of being loved there. But that wasn't love, it was convenience. And for the first time, I wasn't convenient to anyone. I was free. Months passed. My art account blew up faster than I could have dreamed. People started DMing me for commissions, portraits, album covers, even tattoos. I was pulling in enough money to quit one of my coffee shifts, which felt unreal. I kept waiting for the moment I'd crumble, the homesickness to hit, but it never came. Then one night, my phone, the same cracked one I'd left with buzz nonstop. I almost ignored it until I saw the group chat name, Family Rehart. My stomach dropped. Mom had sent a picture, Lila standing next to a booth at some Young Creators Expo. Her handmade jewelry was spread across velvet cloths, lights shining perfectly. The caption read, "So proud of our girl. Hard work pays off." Hundreds of likes. A dozen comments from relatives. Not one mention that I even existed. I closed the app and threw my phone onto the bed. For a second, I almost caved, almost texted, "Congrats, Lila." Old habits die hard. But something stopped me. Why should I keep reaching for people who only looked up when my sister's reflection caught the light? The next morning, I channeled every ounce of that bitterness into a new piece: 2 women, identical faces, one fading into a mirror while the other painted herself into color. I titled it Unreflected. It went viral overnight. Messages poured in. Strangers telling me they cried. One woman wrote, "You captured my whole childhood." I sat there in shock, staring at the comments. For once, being invisible had given me something to say. A few days later, I got an email from an art collective in Portland. They wanted to feature my work in a small gallery show. "We love your voice," the curator wrote. "It feels raw, personal, alive." Alive. That word hit different. I booked the ticket with my next commission check. Packed like just my sketchbook, my laptop, and a heart that felt brand new. As the bus pulled away, I looked out the window, watching my old town shrink into nothing. If my family ever looked for me, they'd find a new address, a new name, even because I'd started signing my art as L. Vale. A small rebellion, but it was mine. The gallery buzzed like a beehive when I walked in, not chaotic, but alive in a way I'd never felt before. People dressed in mismatched layers of color and purpose, wine in hand, wandering between hanging canvases and sculptures made from rusted bicycles. I kept to the corner at first, unsure what to do with my hands, my body, my name. My art was mounted on the center wall. Unreflected, the twin figures, one fading, the other blooming with color framed in stark white, backlit like it meant something holy. I stood across the room and watched as strangers drifted toward it. They read the caption. They tilted their heads. Some got very still. A man in a leather jacket whispered, "That's the one I saw online. She captured something real, didn't she?" His partner nodded, and I felt my lungs tighten in disbelief. They didn't know I was standing 15 feet away, the girl with a duffel bag life and a cracked phone legacy. Then a woman, maybe 50, with silver hair pulled back into a braid, approached. "You're L. Vale, right?" I froze. I just wanted to say, "My sister and I haven't spoken in years. Your painting made me call her today." "Thank you?" I nodded, stunned. She walked away. It happened again and again. People thanking me for helping them feel seen. For telling the story they never got to tell. My story? And then I saw her. Across the gallery, near the entrance. Black coat, nervous hands, big eyes. My twin. Lila. She didn't see me at first. She stood in front of Unreflected, staring so long I thought she'd turned to stone. Then she looked around searching and our eyes locked. Her mouth dropped open. I saw every emotion crash through her, shock, guilt, awe. She made her way over slowly, like I might vanish if she moved too fast. "Lily?" My voice came out before I could plan it. "It's Vale now. I didn't know you'd be here," she said, eyes glistening. "Actually, I wasn't even sure it was you. Until I saw the painting." There was a silence between us. Not the old kind, the suffocating one that came when she talked and I didn't. This was something else, respectful. Waiting. "You made all of this," she finally whispered. "On your own. I mean, you disappeared. You just vanished." I shrugged. Didn't feel like anyone noticed. She flinched. "I noticed. I've noticed every single day since." I didn't know what to say to that. We were surrounded by strangers, but this moment felt more intimate than any birthday or family dinner we'd shared growing up. "Mom saw the painting online," she said. She cried. "She's been trying to find you. She keeps saying, I didn't know she felt like that." "She didn't want to know," I said. "That's the difference." Lila nodded. "Yeah. I know. I should have said something. I should have shared the check at least. It's not about the money." I cut in, and I meant it. "It's about being seen. Heard. Respected. I see you now," she said softly. "I think I always did. I was just too comfortable being the center of things." We stood in silence again. She glanced at Unreflected and smiled, tears running down her face. "You're incredible, you know that? This is the kind of art that lives inside people." For once, I didn't deflect. I just said, "Thanks." We hugged. Not a movie-ending, tearful embrace. Just a long, honest one, the kind you give someone when you both know things can never go back to how they were. But maybe, just maybe, they don't need to. Lila left shortly after. I watched her go, heart steady. At the end of the night, the gallery curator approached me. "We had a collector interested in Unreflected," he said. "But I told them it's not for sale until you say so." I looked at my painting, my story. I thought of the girl I used to be, invisible, waiting for scraps of love. And I whispered, "Not yet. I'm not done with it." Because for the first time, I wasn't fading in anyone's shadow. I was the light. After Portland, things moved fast. I was invited to join a traveling showcase for emerging artists in New York, Chicago, Austin. Every city felt like another page I was finally getting to write for myself. I lived out of suitcases and sketchbooks, ate gas station granola bars, and slept in cheap hostels with noisy pipes. I'd never been happier. My art evolved, too. I stopped painting just about invisibility. I started exploring what finding yourself looks like, the messy, glorious aftermath of deciding you deserve more. People responded. They cried in front of canvases. They told me their own stories: the middle child, the overlooked daughter, the late bloomer who bloomed anyway. One night in Chicago, after a particularly emotional gallery event, a woman in a blazer approached me. "I run a foundation for young artists," she said. "We offer year-long residencies, studio space, funding, no strings. I think you'd be perfect." I applied. I got it. When the email came through, I was in a diner in Queens sketching something on a napkin. I read the subject line, "Congratulations, L. Vale," and nearly dropped my coffee. I moved into the studio 3 weeks later. My name was on the door. My own studio. My own keys. I wish I could say my family reached out more after Portland, but they didn't, not much. Lila sent me a couple of updates, Mom asking if I was okay, Dad forwarding an article about my gallery show. Nothing heartfelt. Nothing vulnerable. Just cautious curiosity. Like they were watching a movie they weren't sure they were allowed to like. At first, that stung. A part of me still wanted that redemption arc, the teary phone call, the apology, the "we were wrong." But it never came. And slowly, I realized I didn't need it. I didn't need them to name the pain for it to be real. Because I was healing anyway. One day, I stood in my studio, looking at the wall I'd painted black as a base. I took a deep breath, dipped my brush into yellow, bright, defiant, sun-warm yellow, and made a single, deliberate stroke. I was done painting from wounds. It was time to paint from power. A few months into the residency, I had an exhibition of my own solo, they called it. My name, L. Vale, printed in thick white letters on the gallery windows. I stood outside before the doors opened, staring at the reflection of that name. My name. Not my sister's. Not my parents'. Mine. The gallery filled quickly. Friends I'd made along the way showed up. A few people I'd never met recognized my face from articles. Someone asked if they could interview me for a podcast. Another brought a copy of one of my earliest prints and asked me to sign it. But the wildest moment? Toward the end of the night, when the lights were warm and low, I saw two familiar figures by the door. My parents. I didn't move at first. Just watched. Mom looked nervous, holding her purse like it was a life raft. Dad stood stiff, like he was afraid someone would ask him to describe abstract art. They spotted me. I braced myself for guilt, for tension, for the same old scripted disappointment. But when they reached me, Mom's eyes were red-rimmed. "Hi," she said softly. "We weren't sure you'd want us here. But Lila told us where to come. She said you'd earned it." I didn't speak. "Not yet." Dad cleared his throat. "This is incredible, Lily. All of it. We didn't know what you were carrying." Mom looked at the painting behind me, a massive canvas of two girls, hand in hand, walking into a golden field, faces obscured, but painted with joy. "I thought we supported both of you," she whispered. "I see now we didn't. Not equally. Not even close." I swallowed hard. "Why now?" She looked at me, really looked, and said, "Because it took me seeing the parts of you I ignored, turned into something beautiful and painful and honest, to realize what we lost." We stood there, wrapped in quiet. Not fixed. Not suddenly whole. But something raw and real. "Can we come again?" Dad asked. "Next time?" I looked at them, two flawed people trying, finally, to look past their own reflections. And for the first time in years I said, "Maybe." The next time came sooner than I expected. A month later, I was invited to speak on a panel called Art and the Unseen Self. It wasn't fancy, just a local arts center with mismatched chairs and flickering stage lights, but it felt massive to me. They wanted me not just for my art, but for my voice. The girl who once couldn't get a word in at her own dinner table was now being asked to speak. I wore black jeans, my favorite thrift store jacket, and no makeup, just myself. When I stepped on stage and looked at the audience, I froze. Second row, dead center. Lila. She wasn't smiling. She was listening. I gave the talk I'd practiced in the mirror a dozen times. About growing up invisible. About what it means to be someone's twin, and still feel like you were born as a shadow. About how invisibility can crush you or, if you survive it, sharpen you into someone who sees everything. Afterward, during the Q&A, someone asked, "What would you say to the people who didn't see you back then?" My throat went dry. I looked at Lila. She gave me the smallest nod. "I'd say thank you," I said slowly. "Because if they had seen me, maybe I would have never learned how to see myself." Later, Lila waited for me by the exit. She didn't say much, just handed me a small, folded envelope. "Don't open it now. Just when you feel like it." I waited until I got home, sitting on the floor of my tiny kitchen. Inside was a card. Handwritten. No flowers. No glitter. Just one sentence. "I know now what it cost you to be my sister." Below that, a check. $10,000. I blinked. On the memo line it said, "To invest in your future." Like they should have. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to reject it, too late, too weird, too heavy. But something in me softened. It wasn't the money. It was the message. "I see you now." I folded the check back into the envelope, pressed it flat, and slid it into the drawer with my favorite brushes. Not because I needed it. But because finally, someone gave it to me just because I mattered. The next painting came like a fever. I stayed up 3 nights in a row, drinking bad coffee, sketching furiously, covering the walls of my studio in loose charcoal outlines and color palettes taped side by side. I knew exactly what it needed to be. Not about loss. Not about invisibility. But about emergence. When it was done, it was the biggest piece I'd ever created, taller than me, wide enough to fill a wall. 2 girls, still unmistakably twins, but this time they weren't separated. They weren't mirrored. They were dancing. Laughing. Covered in paint. Messy, radiant, real. Behind them, a trail of torn photographs and muted family portraits the past acknowledge, but no longer dictating the frame. I called it Rewritten. It went up in a solo show I hosted myself, not through a gallery, not through a collective. Mine. I rented a downtown space, hung every piece by hand, printed the invites, picked the music, an all-female playlist, naturally, and bought cheap wine that tasted like freedom. And people came. Old friends. New ones. Strangers who had followed my work since the first viral post. Even a few artists I used to admire from a distance showed up and said, "You've got something different. Something raw." But what hit hardest was this: Mom came. Alone. She didn't bring Dad. She didn't try to make a scene. She wore a soft blue sweater and walked slowly from piece to piece, like she was letting every version of me sink in. When she reached Rewritten, she didn't cry. She smiled. "I didn't know this was in you," she said quietly. And I didn't know how much I missed by not asking. I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. But I did say, "You're here now." We stood side by side, not holding hands, not hugging, just standing. Seeing the same thing for once. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and said, "Can I take a picture of it?" I laughed. "Only if you promise to hang it on the fridge next to Lila's jewelry photos." She grinned. "Deal." And just like that, not everything was healed. But something was different. The silence between us had finally changed shape. It didn't echo anymore. 6 months later, I was on a train headed north for a weekend art retreat in the mountains, 3 days off-grid with other weirdos who made things out of pain and color. I had no idea what I was chasing anymore. I just knew I wasn't running from anything. My phone buzzed. Lila. Lila, Mom showed me the new painting. Rewritten. She won't stop talking about it. I think she's finally getting it. Me, took long enough. Lila, we both did. I smiled. Funny how text messages from her used to knot my stomach. Now they felt familiar. Not perfect. But real. The train curved along a ridge, snow catching in the evergreens outside. I pulled out my sketchbook, the same one I'd carried since the night I left. The front pages were worn, smudged, tired. The middle was wild with color. But the back pages were blank. I stared at one for a while. Then I drew 2 girls. Not twins this time. Just sisters. One looking forward. One holding her hand. neither fading. Underneath I wrote, "Some people are born seeing. Others have to paint themselves into focus." And I did. All of it, the leaving, the silence, the cracked phone, the doubt, the late nights, the hunger, the yellow paint, the gallery walls that brought me here. I never got a check in high school. I never got a speech at the dinner table. I never got handed the crown. But I built the crown. I bent the wire, I polished the scrap metal, I painted it gold and wore it crooked and proud. Because I wasn't the forgotten twin. I was the one who left. The one who dared to disappear and came back as someone no one could overlook again. This time, not even me.